Year!
Merry New Year!
So we're live. All right. Welcome, Facebook, to the home of Adam Quiney and Toku McCree. We don't live in the same home, actually. It's gonna be
hmm
disappointing for people. We're gonna think we're like bosom buddies, and we like dress up as women. And
Based on the very feminine energy heart you sent me
yes,
on a
yeah,
text message. Yeah. So I'm
yeah,
just looking at your background. We've got the samurai coach. I like that. There's a sword.
yeah.
Just one though. Hey, you're a single blade master, not a dual blade wielder.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, just the single one right now.
Just the one for now. Yeah. It's
Just the
easier to
one.
clean too. It's less you
Yeah.
have to deal with.
You don't have your screen behind you. I thought we are gonna be very samurai
Very Zen
looking.
dojo.
But no screen behind you. I guess we should tell
All
people what we're doing, right?
well, I think this is pretty self-explanatory what's happening right now. Hey, Victor. Yes, yes. Togu, tell them what we're doing. Tell the people what we're doing.
So welcome everyone. This is Adam and I wanted to try a thing out called Dear Sensei. The sort of vision behind it was like it's like a Dear Abby for coaches. So we love like ask. Did you make that little title pop up? Was that you? Oh,
Yeah.
look at you with your technical know-how. You millennials. I'm a millennial too, actually, so I shouldn't complain. So like a Dear Abby for coaches. We love like one of our favorite things to do is to go into coaching groups. When Rich Litvin has his group, we used to like make video posts responding to coaches' questions. We thought it'd be super fun to do that in a live format, and we got some questions in advance. So that's why we're here. So we're going to be addressing primarily those questions, but I'm open to getting questions from people live. Are you open to that, Adam?
Oh, I would love live question, guys. If you interact with us, it's so much more fun for everyone involved. So please, I would say almost preferentially, I'd take live questions. I'm not going to say that, but like I would love that. Yeah, we'll
Okay,
wrap them in.
we'll wrap them in. Just wrap it,
Yeah, we'll wrap them right in.
wrap it up,
Yeah.
because we're rappers.
Wow, that was good rap even right there.
Are you drinking tea?
I'm just finishing the last bit of decaf here, and then I'm on to my Bengal spice tea. You want to know a
Okay.
fun fact that I just noticed about tea for me?
Yeah. Let's do it.
This is the stage of the live where we build rapport with the audience. They're getting to know us. We're generating intimacy. I drink a lot of tea, like maybe four teapots a day, which is quite a lot. And
A lot of tea.
yeah, and I like to make it strong and then put it with milk. So it's kind of like a coffee-like substance I'm drinking, like a really thick. In England, they call it a builder's tea. And I was I was just pulled the milk out of the fridge the other day and I had it on the counter and I was like, I wonder how many calories are in milk. And then I poured it into my cup and then measured it and took a look and I was like, holy crap, I'm drinking like 700 calories of milk every day just with the quantity of milk and the strength of the tea that I was drinking. So I stopped that. I'm now going raw. I'm raw dogging my tea.
Wow. I'm watching myself on Facebook trying to pretend like I'm not like sharing the event, this thing to different groups and doing a really bad job of it. It's really obvious
Trying
that
to
I'm
be
working my
interested in this
computer.
really dull tea story that I'm telling.
Like, oh yeah, that's really interesting. No, it's you're right. It is a lot of milk to drink during the day. That is a lot of milk. I drink black coffee in the morning because I do intermittent fasting. So I drink just black coffee, and I'm drinking a spinach, blueberry, banana, and pineapple smoothie right now. So that's my beverage of choice. That's how I break my fast every day.
I
So
did say that, Libby. Libby is asking, first question for Dear Sensei, did you just say raw dogging? The answer, did you just say raw dogging? The answer is yes.
yeah, that is true. That did happen. So if
Yep.
you were curious, that's the level we're playing at here. So
Okay, you wanna hit up this first question?
let's do it. All right. So
You think them in order?
I'm gonna read it. So yeah, I put them in order.
And I can put it up here too. You want me to do that?
Put it up. Oh, where you can put it up on the
Right there.
screen. Oh, look
Yeah.
at that.
You like that?
So first question, dear Sensei, what problems or situations have you come across where you feel you cannot help the person? Sign, hopelessly devoted to coach.
Hmm. Wow, so sweet. What problems or situations have you come across where you feel like you cannot help the person? Well, okay, so I'll start by, I think we should leave this up. Yeah, that's good. I think that's good to have there. That's not too distracting. So, first of all, I'll own this is a huge trigger for me because one of the fears I have, like a core fear for me, is of being irrelevant or not being able to make a difference. And so when I feel like I can't support someone, it just gets me. It triggers all my fears. And then my fears become like resentful. And like that's how my fear transmutes very quickly into resentment, judgment. Fuck you. The problem's over there. You should want my support. Um, so the biggest place I see that is usually before I'm in a coaching relationship with someone. Like once they've made the commitment into the investment and the time and all of that in coaching these days, most people I work with are pretty they're open to the conversation, if nothing else, which is really, I think, the main part. But there are two places where this isn't the case. So the first is before we're in the coaching conversation, and in those places, the best, like the thing, I can. It's not really a problem or situation. It's just the person isn't like they don't want to go that deep. You know, they don't want to have a really intense coaching conversation, or they've had one and they're like, I just want to sit with this for now, or I don't want to go any further into this. And my job in those places is to get my trigger, to set it aside, and to acknowledge that there's something showing up for me. It's just my fears. It's not even true, and to let them be with it, like to actually let them choose whatever path is in front of them instead of. My coach put it this way. She was like, you know, Adam, you're really good at seeing a path for people, but you lose sight of the fact that it's a path instead of the path.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one more, but I'll let you talk for a bit and then I'll.
Yeah, cool.
I'll
you can tee it up right now. So you can be T and I'll be smooth. So we'll do it that way. So yeah, for me, this question is really interesting. I think there's two parts of it. So one is like when you feel like you cannot help a person, and I'm like, that happens all the time. Like I have moments like that as coach all the time, right? And so part of it for me is recognizing that like the person I'm working with or coaching, like they're like super enrolled in that they cannot be helped, right? And they're like so enrolled in it, they're like enrolling everyone else around them and how like there is no way they could be helped with this thing. And so it's sort of like, oh right, like I just am now doing the thing that everyone else does around them, right? They get enrolled in like how impossible it is to help them. Yeah. So the first place for me is always just like step back and notice that like, oh wow, like I've fallen a little bit into like the client's world and they've got me really like enrolled into what they think is true. And then of course I can get very enrolled in my own like, oh, I can't do this, right? That can also happen at the same time. So for me, like I like to like just call that out if I can notice it. I don't always notice it right away. Like, hey, this thing is happening. I'm noticing this is happening. I wonder what comes up for you. And then I actually wrote like I had this idea to write like a whole, like what I was going to call like a non-emergency manual for coaches for like, what do I do when my client shows up like this? At first I was going to call it an emergency manual. Then I was like, that's not really the spirit of coaching. And so thought about calling it a non-emergency manual. And as when a client shows up with resistance, like just kind of acknowledging that for yourself as the first step. And then the second step is like saying to the client, like, hey, this is a normal part of the process, right? Like, I think if you're not in doing the work with a client or with a prospect and they don't ever come up with like, I can't be helped, you're probably not like doing real work with them, right? Because otherwise, if you're not running into that resistance at all, you probably don't have them on their edge. So that like, yeah, you like that?
Yeah, hell yeah.
You want to riff for a second?
Well, yeah, like I think that's one of the places I see coaches, to use your language, you've said this before, like abandon their clients at the altar, so to speak, or at the doorway. Is they always leave empowered, or my clients never get nasty. Like, really? But like that's part of our humanity. What's happening that their humanity is not fully showing up for you? Oh, I'm just really lovely with them. Well, that's weird. Because the world isn't just always really lovely with people, and coaching is the container within which the world shows up and we distinguish it. So yeah, I 100% agree. That's a significant part of it.
Yeah. And I do think there is a natural, like, I think the other piece of this question that and that's sort of like on the tactical side, more on the kind of like spiritual philosophy being side of being a coach. Like, I think that this question of like, how do you confront the despair or the like wall of like struggle and resistance to change as a like depth worker, like that in some ways is like the fundamental like spiritual question as a coach, as a depth worker. Like some days you're just going to show up and just be like, this is hopeless, and people are like stuck, and I can't have an effect. And so, and there's some tactical ways to deal with it, but I also think it's like for you as coach, what are you doing to like be resourced? What are you doing to take care of yourself? Are you working with a coach and being inspired about the change you're creating? And like, where are you at with your like self-care in your life, right? Because if you're losing hope, you're losing possibility. How the hell are you going to bring that to your clients if you can't find that possibility in yourself?
Yeah. So there's kind of two reactions I see, because the way this question is posed is like, oh, where have we come across it? But like you and I could write lists for the next million years, right? Like there's all these places where it shows up.
I think my hand would actually get tired.
Not mine.
All right. Well,
yeah. But like there's the content is the thing to avoid getting enrolled in, right? Because the content will be like, I can't change because of this, or I can't change because of that, or I can't support this client because they're resistant to me. And I had a client once who was a coach, and often one of the things he'd bring to our calls was, I've got this client, Adam, and he's resisting the coaching, and I can't seem to get him past it. He's totally resisting the coaching. And that's like, he's relating to it like an issue, like there's a way the client should be, right? As opposed to just getting really curious about it, because I think as a coach, that's the gift we can bring. It's just like, hey, seems like you're super resistant to this. And is that like your intention? Is your intention that you show up in this conversation with someone you've hired to support you and get into a fight with them? And we have to be clean in order to have that conversation. Because if there is a part of us that's like, fuck you, do the thing I say, you're giving them something to resist against, which is why we have to do our own work. We got to work with our own coach to make sure that we're kind of clean. But from that place, what up, Nathan? That conversation can be so rich. Because like you said, they're doing this everywhere in the world. We're like the coaching conversation, the only place where the person's like not attached to it. Just like, hey, it's weird. You say you want to do something with me, and then you're fighting me on it. What up with that?
Yeah. I think the last thing I want to say in this question, maybe we can move on to another one, is like, and you're going to have sessions that feel like, especially when you're doing like prospect sessions, like you're going to have sessions where it feels like you didn't do any good. The client was totally resistant. They were a no to coaching. And I would just say, like, don't get out ahead of your client, or don't like just assume you know what the impact is, because you don't know, right? I mean, I had a client that I worked with for a year who was just like really difficult client. Like it just felt like we're grinding, and it was like a different subject every week. And I was just like, man, I don't know. And about 6 months in, we hit this like really like rich vein of like stuff. And what I realized kind of in that second half of this coaching was that the first 6 months was just like, was I going to show up on the call with her every day, be with her, and keep like creating space for possibility. Like that's all I was doing for 6 months. Right. And so I think that we have to be careful that like, it may be that for a prospect, it may be deeply healing and meaningful to have them show up with their resistance, be completely uncoachable, totally enrolled in like how they can't be helped. And for us to be like, I still believe in you, and I'm not upset that you're showing up in this resistance, right? Because probably when they were kids, they showed up with that resistance, and the world was just like, you're going to go to school and you're going to clean the yard, and just beat on them. So just being with them like compassionately can be like deeply, deeply healing. So don't, even if it feels like I didn't do any good, like be careful not to just be like, screw it, I'm awful at this, coaching is worthless. Be open to the possibility that if you show up powerfully, if you show that being and with that compassion, like you can have an impact, even if you can't see the impact right then.
That is the challenge, isn't it? To let go of our attachment to creating results, but at the same time, deepen our own practice and our mastery. And you and I will talk more about that. I think at the end of this, we'll speak a little bit to some ways to do that. But that is the tightrope that the coach walks. Is like, am I being too attached, or am I now being too laissez-faire and not caring and all that stuff? Okay, let's bring up another question.
Do it. You want to read this one?
Yeah, and I put it on the screen. Boom. Is that? Oh, it's a little longer than that. That's the starting. So, coaches, dear Sensei, coaches, the coaching books I'm reading tell me not to offer insight or reads or ideas to my clients. I think by reads, they mean like, I'm going to read you this thing, or I've got to read on you.
Yeah, I think that's the latter one.
Yeah, that I should only ask questions because if I offer insight, I'm taking power and agency and ownership away from the client. But this feels restrictive to me, almost unnatural. How do you balance questions versus offering insight? Brackets, thanks so much, y'all. They said all, but I wanted it to be y'all. Signed, the hesitant inquisitor.
Cool. So I think you started for you started first. So I'll start first on this
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Yeah. So this is a great question. This is something that like I know we talk about in the Samurai Coaching Dojo. I'm sure you guys kind of covered in your program as well, which is the language we use around it is we talk about the balance between leading and holding, right? So like really great coaches do some aspect of leading, and so leading could be like taking someone through a guided meditation. It could be like doing some teaching. It could be like kind of going down a line of inquiry where you kind of know where you're going. Like, I'm asking these questions, but I know at the end of this is like bankruptcy of your survival mechanisms at the end of this road, right? So you might know that. We call that leading. And then versus like holding, which is just like being with the client, right? And a little bit of like, I'm going to get a little coach geeky here. So if people like, this is too geeky, just send the comments like, Toku, take your glasses off, Poindexter. So I've done a little bit of research in the history of coaching, and coaching largely developed from this school of therapy called person-centered therapy, which made as primary the relationship between the therapist and the client. And so a lot of this, and it was kind of a rejection of the very kind of method-heavy psychotherapy that was going on and very like intense structure. And so it was a kind of a move away from that. And so a lot of this like pure coaching is only you're just with the client and they don't know leading and it's just you're being with them, comes from this sort of person-centered therapy philosophy, right? So it's not like ingrained in the heart of what coaching is. It's just sort of like one of the original places coaching came from. So I would say like really good coaches know like when not to lead the client, right? They know how to hold. And if you're like really, really heavy on the leading front where you're just like giving lots of advice and you're like just talking a bunch, I think that's a good indication to like step back and see what's going on. And I've seen some like pretty gnarly coaching sessions where the client is just like, and the coach is like, yeah, what else? And I'm just like, dude, you need to interrupt the pattern, you need to change something and do something else. So I would say I kind of reject all absolutes when it comes to coaching. And I think for a new coach, I would lean a little bit more on the hold back, listen, lead a little less, but then pepper in some leading, right? Pepper in some times where you like lead stuff. And the question for me is always like, is the client dropping deeper as I'm holding, like as I hold space for them? Are they like revealing more? Are they like, is something getting cleared out or being emptied out here? Or are they just like, just, dog chasing its own tail? Because, I don't think that's necessarily great coaching. Though there is some value in watching a dog chase its own tail. It's really adorable or amusing if that's what you're into. So that's kind of my initial thought.
Okay, first, shout out. Let's give some shout outs. Libby says geeky is great. Libby, you're our kind of people. You may stay. What up, Sia or Sia Wash? I think I'm saying that right. And anyone else we got to say hi to?
Nazma.
Nuno, what's up, dude? Nuno's got his profile photo is him next to Conor McGregor, so I don't want to mess with him. I don't know if you know who Conor McGregor is. He's a very outspoken
I do.
MMA fighter.
He's very outspoken. The Irish Tiger, or he's an interesting guy.
Yeah. Okay, so I love this question, and I will caveat the answer with the fact that I believe that like on some level, coaching is kind of like Taoism in as much as it's about the middle path. And that the way to walk the middle path is to be open to discovering that you are not walking the middle path. And as soon as you believe that you know that you're walking the middle path, you are not walking the middle path. You have probably found some strategy and fallen off. And so any answer we will give for some people will become their next crutch, which then they will have to abandon at the next stage in the journey. So
preach, brother.
Yeah. That being said, I really like, let me just see which one of these we'll start with. So first, I heard this Tony Robbins quote where he said, I'm like an applied psychologist, but really whatever I am is whatever's required in the moment, kind of to your point, right? Like, is the client deepening or are they just going around in circles? And that's a great way to kind of look at this and think about it, because it speaks to me that there is no right answer. There's just like, what is going to move the client forward? And as soon as there's a preference that we have, that now represents a block in ourselves as coach. Because if I prefer to give advice, which almost all of us as humans do, I would say, maybe that's not true, but like by telling other people what to do, it kind of, let me reword this. All people like me like to give advice because it validates me. It puts me in a position of power, of authority. People appreciate.
I think everyone likes to give advice. I think it's just like it's this sort of, it's like a suffering strategy. It's sort of like, I'm experiencing your suffering and I don't want to be with it because it's really uncomfortable. But if I give you advice, then I've tried to help you, right? And then you either take my advice, which means you'll be out of suffering, or you don't. And then that's your problem to be with you anymore because I've told you what to do. So it's totally, I think everyone does it.
Yeah. So given that that's our preference, that becomes a potential hook in coaching. It's going to be like where our car naturally steers when we take our hands off the wheel. And we're most likely to take our hands off the wheel when we're scared of something or confronted by it. And so I agree with you. No absolutes. And to your point, I think it's really valuable for people, especially early on as new coaches, to do exactly what you said, which is to lean more towards just asking questions. And actually, one of the best ways to really confront something, I can't remember who said this, but they said it's easier to do something 100% than it is 99%. And so when a coach is starting out, I actually think it's a good practice, not forever, but for like the next 3 months, you're only going to ask questions. So that you really hone a mastery in asking questions. You really have to become comfortable with not giving advice. You really have to be okay with not, like, it's hard to push your client in a certain direction when you're only asking questions, provided they're ones that are actually from curiosity. So I think that's a really great practice for coaches to take on, and specifically for our hesitant inquisitor. This feels restrictive to me, almost unnatural. Definitely would recommend practicing then doing that, and like bring that to your coach. Like, hey, I've got this relationship to just asking questions that feels restrictive and unnatural. Can we unpack that a bit for me? What am I making that mean? What's the story that I'm creating in my head about that? Why is that unnatural? And why is it natural to tell people what to do more so than to ask them questions? Yeah. It's all made up anyhow. So
yeah, I love that. I really think that like, one of the things you can really learn by doing this and I think it's really clear, like ask questions. And these are like, in general, I just tell coaches, like, don't ask questions you know the answers to. Like, I hate when a coach is like, well, would you rather like stick your hand in a vat of fire or like eat a sundae? And I'm like, well, pretty sure I'd like to eat a sundae. I don't know. Let me think about that, right? You could do that a little bit. I do that sometimes. I kind of walk clients down a path, but sometimes it's helpful to kind of like, bring the process out. But in general, like these are really just questions of curiosity. And so part of what's happening when you're doing this particular training and what you're learning is you're learning how to hold the energy, right, of the client, to be there with that discomfort, to be with them, right, which is really hard to do, right? It really takes practice and skill to do it really, really well. And so what happens then is when you get out of that period and you get into leading, you can lead but still be holding the energy, so you don't lose the client, right? Because that's the danger when you're just giving advice, is like you're not really holding the energy of the session. You're just trying to like fix them or try to like make their pain go away rather than like create with them, creating it in this co-creative process. And so I think that's why like it's especially important. And then even after you get off of this, like really like allowing yourself to hold the energy. I had a session the other day where the first half hour of the session was just like letting my client like just emote, just like let all the feelings out, right? And there were moments in that where I was like, am I doing the right thing? Like, should I step in here? But I was just like, this client hasn't reached the bottom yet. There's still more, right? And what's amazing, because I gave that space, the rest of the session was really, really powerful. And we talk about this a little bit in the dojo as well, which is like, we talk about the drop. And so many coaches are like in the rush to like, I want to get to the part where I'm doing stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, man, if you spent 55 minutes of your conversation getting the client clear about what they want and ready to like talk about what they want, and then 5 minutes talking about it, time would be way better used than if you spend 5 minutes like, oh, no, let's just figure out something to coach on and then try to coach on that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a man who had such a tremendous impact on my life, Christopher McAuliffe, would say there's three things you got to do as a coach. You got to get them, you got to coach them, and then you got to leave them. And most people rush past the coaching them and spend way too much time. Rush past the getting them and spend way too much time in the coaching them and avoid leaving them, because getting them doesn't feel like we're providing value, even though you would be amazed at how much value there is in just like, man, you want to be good at networking? Get people. You'll change people's lives just by looking in their eyes. And then coaches spend way too much time coaching. They coach people for 4 hours because they're afraid to leave them in a place that's disempowered. And it's like, no, that's part of this gift too, is like, now you get to be with what you've become present to, and it's not all pretty.
Yeah. And that's also the key to like creating a really successful coaching business, right? It's again, if you spend more time getting people. I remember the first time that we did an enrollment tournament, which is this weird, it's like a master's. If anybody's watching any of the master coaches fight to the death, we do like an enrollment tournament in the dojo. And like in the first round, one of the participants, one of the samurai, he like made this joke with the like test client about like the show Dallas, which is this show that was popular in the 80s. He did like kind of like a mediocre job on those next two rounds, but because he like had gotten his client and connected, the client kept like picking him. No, I want this guy going on the next round. It was that power. And he had 2 minutes to connect with him. That power of that connection and that rapport with people. Like, we don't just like say that because it's like, well, you got to get to know people. Like, we say it because that's the stuff that creates the trust, the foundation for really, really incredible coaching and creating a lot of success with getting clients.
Yeah. Libby says also, if you overcorrect away from your inclination, you might find a better middle. I think I agree with that. Do I have any? There's something about that I feel like I want to add a piece onto it, but I'm not sure what it is. So I think it's a great, like, just sort of way to hold it. Like, oh, I'm going to overcorrect in the other direction. I'm not going to do this for 3 months or whatever. Someone once told me, Christopher actually said, Adam, I notice every time you're at the front of the room, you make jokes. So for the next 6 months, don't be funny when you're leading from the front of the room. And I was like, fuck you. I love my humor. And he was like, yeah, we too. But you rely on it like a crutch. So take it away. You'll create something new.
Yeah.
And then Romain says presents. Hard to disagree with that.
You think he's going to send us some presents? I think that's what we'll be watching the mail from Romain. I'm looking forward to it. I guess one thing I want to say about Libby's comment is that, like, so yes, like, notice your middle and like move away from the inclination. And like, this is the reason why like Adam and I are both very enrolled in like being in groups of coaches where we're getting feedback, because it's really hard to know when we're kind of like in our comfort zone or in our preference. So having other people say like, hey, your holding is really great, and if you just do like a little bit of leading here, it's going to be way more powerful. Or like, your leading is really good, but if you just like sprinkle in a little bit of holding, it's going to be way better. Like, it's just so hard to see that for yourself. So like, making sure that you get that outside feedback, that outside attention to help you like fine tune it is just so valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, everything in your being, your psyche, your ego is set up to prevent you from seeing the stuff that you would then correct on.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it. My turn.
Your turn to read. Yeah.
So, dear Sensei, sometimes I'm not sure what to bring to my coach or what good coaches even get coached on. So I'm curious, what was the last thing you brought to your own coach? Signed, it's already been brought.
Already been brought in. I struggle with this too, because my default, again, don't want to be irrelevant, don't want to be a disappointment, don't want to look stupid. What else do I have? Don't want to come across as awkward or uncomfortable. These are like core Adam Quiney fears. And I've got a world of strategies based off of those, some of which are show up as not having any needs. So from fear, and for the majority of the first 30 years of my life, I became masterful in showing up as a man without any needs. And consequently, it's a bit challenging sometimes when I'm showing up to calls with my coach. Well, I had one right before this call, actually. And I'm like, what is the request? What am I bringing? Like, what is the coaching request I'm bringing? And so sometimes I bring that. Like, hey, I'm really struggling to come up with a coaching request. Can we look at that struggle? Like, not so much can we look at the content, i.e., can we figure out what my coaching request is, but more like, what is it that has this be such a struggle? Because I'm up to big things. There's always got to be something worthy of coaching. So that's one of the things I've brought. Sometimes I bring like, hey, I want to share everything that I've created in the last while. And then I want you to acknowledge me and just remind me of how awesome I am. And then we'll see where we go from there. Maybe there's nothing else, or maybe that opens something. And then the third thing, what did I bring most recently? I'll offer two more things. So first, I always have a number of projects that I'm working on with my coach. And it's not, doesn't mean that that's all that I work on, but those 4 projects are things I'm committed to moving forward in my life. And so I often look to those projects when I'm trying to figure out what do I want to be coached around. And my coach is masterful. She will look at whatever I'm bringing and then be able to broaden it out to the entirety of my life and then narrow it back down to that project and stuff. But having projects is amazing because then I have a tangible measure of the shift in my being that I want to create. So I'm moving forward both my background and my foreground. Last thing that I brought was most recently, just like I got a bunch of resentments I'm holding on someone, and I intellectually can see how what I'm holding on them is the same as what I hold on myself. Like I can see that I do this stuff, and yet there's a part of me that's not willing, like that is holding an exception. I'm reserving the right for me to be different than this guy. And so she was supporting me in like just looking at that and addressing that. Yeah.
I love that. Thanks for that, man. I love that. Yeah, I don't know if it's because I'm an Enneagram 4, but like I never have like I always have drama to bring to my coach. Like no problem. There's always tons of complaint and struggle. Like I'm very like, oh, I just like I'm in this struggle, right? So that's kind of my game. So I bring everything to my coach. I don't know if I did this with my last coach as much. So I'm coaching with this really incredible guy named Hans Phillips, who Adam actually recommended to me. And like I just like have been like I'll just like send him. I'm in a lot of like breakdown conversation, right? So right now I'm really creating like a breakthrough in leadership, so I can create this next level vision that I'm working on in my business. One of those visions is to create tools and communities that like bend the culture of coaching away from sort of cheap and fly by night to like really deep and powerful. And in creating that breakthrough, there is a ton of breakdown showing up, right? Like all of my stuff is like coming up and like I'm whiny and complaining and like I'll write him emails being like, he's like, reach out to people and ask for help. And I'm like, I'm reaching out. They haven't. It'd be like, an hour. I wrote them an email like, they're not writing me back. It's not working. It's too hard. And, so I just bring all of that crap to my coach. So the last thing I brought to my coach was I got into a fight with someone I care about. And it was sort of like I mentioned offhand this thing that I didn't think would be a big deal, and like something really big showed up for them, right? I call it like it's like I stepped on a survival mechanism, like landmine. And my tendency when I do that is to like abandon myself and be like, all right, my needs and boundaries don't matter. How can I take care of you? How can I like mold my identity to like match the identity you're with? And I was trying really hard not to do that. And so I have a lot of fear comes up like I'm not being compassionate. I'm not doing a good job. I'm being a bad man, right? Because I'm supposed to be like this holder of containers and like this powerful leader. And so I just like, hey, like I brought this thing and I'm in practice. I don't know if I'm doing a good job. And how can you support me with this? And so what I've been learning a lot and getting from him is one is some like healing work, but two, like he's been really encouraging me to like show up with like the sort of breakdown of leadership, like, the model of leadership that we have where like, I'm a leader and I'm perfect and don't see any of the mess. Like we tried that and that has not worked. Right. Mm-hmm. And so he's really pushing me to show up with breakdown, both in our coaching, but also like in the world and being like, hey, this is what becoming a leader looks like. It's not pretty. It's not like I walk into a bar and they sign me to the record label. It's, drinking a glass of water that has a cigarette put out in it. Sometimes it's this sort of brutal process. So that's what I bring to my coach.
I love that one. Like said that quick. I love all of that. And I especially love like showing up with the breakdowns in your coaching. Because what a lot of people do is they relate, once they say yes to their commitment to the work with their coach, they don't relate to it that way. They relate to it like, I just have to get through to this to the end. But a more powerful place would be to relate to it like, I'm not saying you signed this contract, but like, I am with this coach forever. Now, if you started from that point and there was a breakdown in how you were relating to your coach or the quality of the coaching you felt you were getting or how you felt about your coaching, you got to do something because you're stuck with this forever. And so that's kind of what I hear in what you're describing, Toku. And sometimes I'll bring that to my coach, like, hey, I've got concerns or I'm worried about this. I've been with my coach for a while and her name's Rachel Parks and she is an angel from heaven. And I don't even know how she works with me. So these days we're pretty, I have a lot of trust in her and a lot of love with her. But earlier on, I brought a lot of that stuff.
We have a question from Romain.
Yeah. And
are you ever worried?
Firstly, Karen, that dude sounds like trouble. Steer clear of him.
Yeah, watch out. Watch out for him, Karen. So Romain asks, are you ever worried that I think this is your coach is struggling coaching you, and then you end up helping your coach you?
Yes to the first part for me. I constantly worry because I'm like, how is she so good? Like, how is she working with this horse crap that I'm bringing? I don't understand. And so I worry about that. Like, I often worry that I'm just a shit client. And, but I don't help her coach me. I would, instead of doing that, if I noticed it, then I would tell her, or I would say, I'm worried I'm helping you coach me right now. Or I'm worried I feel this need to help you in this moment. So I would bring that forward.
Yeah. It's hard to say. I mean, part of me is like, I think that like when I'm really showing up with my coach and my coach is being really real, like they are kind of struggling to coach me, right? Because like, I mean, if it was super easy to coach me, like I'd have just coached myself to do it already, right? Yeah. So like I can coach myself a little bit, like, I don't need much coaching to like make a smoothie, right? Because I'm like, I know I have the resources and the know how to do that. And so when it comes to like creating a big 25-year vision, like, then that's like, oh, I don't know how to do that. That's where I need support. I need challenge. I need someone to like really push me. And so I would say if they're not struggling at all, like that would also kind of like worry me. But, again, it really depends on the situation and what's going on with your coach. But I would bring that, hey, like sometimes I feel like you struggle coaching me. Like what, I'm curious, like what's showing up for you? Like, is that my concern? Like what's going on? And then just see how they handle that. I mean, I will say that like, it may be that you need to change coaches. It just depends on your coach, right? But it depends like what's the struggle about and what's going on with it. And
have you brought it forward? Because a lot of people get into that struggle and they're like, maybe I need to change coaches, but they never bring this to their coach. So it's like, well, you haven't really created the intimacy yet with your coach to know whether or not you should change.
Yeah. And then I would really look for like how your coach responds to that. Like they definitely should look over on their side. That's a good indication to look on their side. And they should talk to you a little bit about that process. So be very careful. They just like put it all back on you. Like it is still like, I think that there's a way it can really be about you and serving you. So like, that's not like a huge red flag, but like they should definitely like take it in if their sort of response is like, what are you talking about? I'm not having any problems coaching you. Like, that's just your fear. Like if they kind of show up defensive, that might be a time to kind of check in with like what's going on in this relationship, because it's hard for it's a challenge because as a coach, you do want to be looking at your side, like what's going on for you and how could you coach better. But if you just start showing up with like, well, I don't know, like, am I doing a good job? Then like the client is leading and then it gets kind of funky. So you want to see the coach looking on their side, but ideally they should be like, hey, I'm going to bring that to my coach. Right. Thank you for that. I see some pieces here for me. I'm going to bring that to my coach and I'll come back to you. And then here's what I see here for you. Are you open to working on that? To me, that's like sort of that's what I would want as a client to have my coach do.
Last thing I'll say is more often than not what I see. So I don't want to negate anything that you just said, Toku. I agree with all of it. And kind of like the default I find for people is to give advice rather than to be more curious. The default I find for people generally in this kind of thing is to be avoiding the intimacy rather than to be creating the intimacy and then not getting, doesn't mean that the other one doesn't happen, but that's the default I see people tend towards because frankly, it's safer not to have that conversation, have it with other people. They'll confirm what you want to hear, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Definitely like bring it to your coach. That's the kind of stuff that like is really, really good to bring to your coach. If you're not going to bring it to your coach, who are you going to bring it to? You know, like,
Yeah, and they'll grow the relationship too. It's beautiful what it can create. Like
yeah.
those are such juicy conversations. I love it when my client comes to me and is like, this is the best thing a client can say to me, or one of. I hope no clients are listening, and then they're all going to bring it. But it's like, oh my God, I really, really, really want to quit. I'm not going to. I'm clear on my commitment, but I really want to in this moment, and I'm mad at you. And like, can we? That is such a rich conversation because they're clear on. Then we don't have to like have the conversation about what it looks like to quit. We can just actually address the context that's showing up. That is always an incredible conversation.
All right. Romain has like said thanks like 3 times. So he's kind of like, hey, move off my question. Guy, you give me too much attention. So
Let's get
let's,
them off that page. Boom, you're gone. You ready for the next one?
yeah,
Am I reading? I'm reading this
I
one.
think you're reading this one. Yeah.
Okay. Dear Sensei, I had a session today with a client who recently lost their job. Their attorney is not allowing them to speak to anyone, including myself, about the circumstances or the legal steps. This was frustrating and then opened for me into an opportunity to coach forward into this gap. And since then, the call has become frustrating again for me. I've typically been the exception to not speaking with anyone. How have others approached this? Signed, the silent coaching partner.
My turn to go first?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he
Yeah.
who reads then does not go first.
Ah, right. That's nice. That I can kind of respond to you. Great.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, first of all, just like my first place to go would like, cool, like what can you coach him around, right? So if there's just, I mean, first of all, like this is always happening with our clients. Our clients are never telling us everything, right? Like, first of all, it's like impossible because they can't see the things that we would need to know. So like, this is just, no, I'm like, this just sounds like a normal coaching conversation, right?
Yeah.
Feels a little external, right? Because there's this other element, like, well, someone's preventing him from talking, him or her. I guess I don't know if it's him or her, but preventing your client from talking. So, but to me, it's just like great. Coach within the bounds of the container that you want to talk about. The other thing that I think would be possible is there is a form of coaching I heard about one time where it's basically coaching that's totally internal to the client. So you might just say, like, let's say they want to work on the legal issue. Like, you might just ask them, like, hey, all right, so close your eyes. Think about for yourself, like what's like the biggest challenge for you or the biggest fear for you around this legal situation. And when you got that, nod your head. And then just be with them. And then when they nod their head, great, cool. So what is it about this challenge that you're avoiding looking at? And when you have something you're avoiding looking at, nod your head. And so it's a really interesting form of coaching, and it could totally be used in this situation, right? And part of this is like as a coach, like, when we talk about this in the dojo a lot, and you and I have talked about this a lot, like about how creative can you get as a coach, right? If you're always doing the same stuff again, that's very boring. But like getting creative about like, okay, how would I coach someone that like simply just isn't talking to me, that isn't able to like speak about this particular thing? How would I do that? And so that's the technique that I would probably recommend, is like doing something like that. What the client really wants to work on is like the legal issue. The thing that I'm not totally clear about from the letter is like, was the client like, I really want to talk to you about this legal thing, but I can't, right? And which you could also like coach them around that. You'd be like, great, what's it like for you to like want to share something with someone and not be able to? Well, what's that experience like? So always lots of coaching opportunity. And if that is what they want to coach on, there's always a way you can find a way to coach someone, even if they can't talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love all those. I think that's probably where I would start is like, what's the real, like, are they wanting to talk about this? Like, is it something they're bringing and they're like, I really want to talk about this, but I can't? Or is it just something this person as coach is feeling like, this is a thing where they can't talk about it? Like, is this about the coach or about the client? That's the first place I would look. And then if it's about the client, I would like, okay, so what is the issue? Is it just feeling gagged, like you can't speak about something? Is it that you need to process it? Is it that you're not sure how to proceed and you want to figure that out, or something else? And then the final place I might go is just invite them. Like, I don't know to what extent it is you can always like abstract and distinguish stuff. Like often the content is really not what matters. So I can tell a story, I can bring something to my coach and be like, this person cut me off in traffic. They then drove slowly in front of me, and then they turned around and gave me the finger, and then they drove off. And I've been mad at them ever since. And this is their license plate, and they had red hair and a mustache. So that's one way I can bring that to my coach. Oh, awesome, Libby, we got you. We'll come back to it. The other way I could bring that is like, hey, I had this situation where I was doing things right. I was following the rules. And I noticed someone else didn't follow the rules and then got upset with me. And I've been hanging on to that for the entirety of my day. That's what really matters in that whole story, right? Like none of the content is relevant. It's the context. And if I could change the way I am about following rules and about people that don't follow rules, holding me in some light, all of this stuff's going to change. So it might be an opportunity to invite your client to practice distinguishing, which is an incredibly valuable skill, especially for coaches, but for clients too, like as a life skill for us to rise up above the fray. So we can kind of see like, what's really going on with me here? What's the real thing at play? So that's probably the other place I might go. I think all of these are awesome approaches.
The one last thing I want to say before we go to Libby's question is, just be, I think there is like a certain energy of like, I'm entitled to know this information as a coach, or how am I supposed to do this, like with a straitjacket on. And one thing I would say is like, if this is a place for you, like this is a great thing to bring to practice. So Dave Burns and Dave's going to be one of the sensei in the next dojo. And then Dave and Adam and I are all in a group called the Grandmaster Circle that we started. And when Dave and I started that group, when Dave and I started that group, we used to do these coaching drills where we would like, one of the things, one of the tools of deliberate practice is creating limitations, right? So like practice with limitations. So like box with one arm behind your back, or box blindfolded. So
don't use your humor.
Exactly. Don't use your humor, right? And so if this is a thing for you, we're like, I don't know how to do it, then I would find someone to practice with and say, great, in this conversation, I want to coach you, and I want you to pick something related to this topic that you will not talk to me about. And when we run across a thing, tell me like I can't talk to you about it. And then practice like working with them around it and find out like, how did that work, right? So you don't have to wait for, this is why we like encourage practice so much. It's like, you don't have to wait for it to be live with a client and be like, I don't know what to do. Be like, great, I know this is a challenge. How can I go practice and prepare myself like athletes and musicians do before they're on stage at the Olympics? How do I practice and prepare myself for this so that when I'm in that live moment, I know what to do?
Yeah, love it.
So Libby's question.
Boom, put it up there. Oh, it blocks you off. I'm going to have it there briefly, and then we'll remove it. Okay. You read the last one? I read the last one. You read this one, and then I'll speak.
So have you ever had a client who keeps saying one thing and then doing another? Never happened for me.
Never, no.
Yeah, like they say they're clear on something, but then they keep going back to it and stirring it up. How do you call that out lovingly?
I just noticed that this, the way I've got Libby's comment is like a passive aggressive way to drill in our height differential to you. Okay.
I can just like.
I feel so short. So, great question all the time. This is like classic human behavior, right? And, so how do you call it out lovingly though? I think that's the important part of this question. And the way you do so is you do your work around it. So you address kind of like, what are you making it mean? What are your judgments of this person? And I can't speak for you, but I have a shitload of judgments when people don't do the thing that they say they're going to do. Like there's integrity as a non-moral thing, kind of just like when you are aligned, things work. And when you are not aligned, they tend not to work. And then there's integrity like a moralistic thing, like you're a good person if you keep your word, and a bad person if you don't. The first thing is a really powerful distinction. The second thing is kind of part of how I grew up and part of my programming. And so when people don't do what they say they're going to do, I get mad and I get triggered by it because I do the same thing with myself. I get upset when I don't do what I say I'm going to do. So walking it back this way, I think, is how we get back to love, is first to get like, oh my goodness, I do that same stuff, and bring it to your coach, and your coach will hopefully like, great, where are you doing that? First of all, Where's that the game you play? Where do you show up out of integrity and then kind of justify it or rationalize it or hide it? And from that place, if we can get ourselves back to like really loving ourselves, there's a whole bunch of work you can do around this. Like you can practice just having compassion for people when you do this. You can have, hey, Dana, you can have practice for yourself when you're doing it. You can empathize, et cetera, et cetera. But once you can get yourself there and really hold it like without any judgment and like it's totally okay, then all you have to do is keep pointing to it. Like, hey, I notice you keep saying you're going to do this and then you don't do it. And I'm just curious if there's anything like, is that what you want to keep doing, or do we need to do something different? And probably your client will go, oh yeah, I got to do something different, and then suggest doing the exact same thing. Oh yeah, this time I'll really do it. Yeah, I noticed that's what you said last week. Is there maybe more structure we need to set in place? Do you need consequences or a date in your calendar or an alarm in your phone or whatever? But the important thing is for you to let go of them needing to actually do what they say they're going to do, because that is none of your business as coach. That is entirely their business as human being.
Yeah, I love that. I want to say what's up to Kendra. She gave us a shout out. So what's up, Kendra? Hello. So it's interesting. Like I took a very different take on the word lovingly. So, and this is just my interpretation of it, so totally could be wrong. But often when I hear coaches ask this, like, how do I call this out lovingly? What I hear in the background is like, how do I call this out without causing my client to have a reaction that I'm going to deem as like unpleasant or difficult to work with, right? Because that's often like how we relate to lovingly. Like I'm getting love in my family growing up when I behave in a way where I don't get yelled at or punished or sent to my room, right? So I think we just need to be I do think you should come from love. And a lot of times when I hear lovingly, I'm like, you're just like trying to make sure that they don't have a breakdown, right? So what I would say is like, probably if you're not like, I think, bringing it to your client, but like getting ready for, if you really do this right, you do it really skillfully, you're probably going to get some shit back, right? You're probably going to like get some stirred up emotions and resistance. And if you don't, like, they're probably not looking at it, right? They're probably not looking at what's going on for you here. So, if they say they're doing one thing and then they're doing another, there is a real power in being sort of confrontational and saying, hey, what are you really committed to? And then being really honest, like, hey, you say you're committed to this, but it's actually, you're not. That's not what's happening. And so like, what's up with that? Let's look at going on there. And warning them like, hey, looking in this place, there's probably something here that you don't want to look up that's going to bring up some feelings, because if it was like what you were going to bring up was puppy dogs and sunshine and rainbows, like you probably looked there already. And so I think there is an opportunity to call it out with open heart, but being willing to confront and be a stand for your client's possibility, right?
Yeah.
And then like, I think for specifically like tactically, these two things, like when they say they're doing one thing and do another, or if they say they're done on something but keep going, stirring up, two of the questions, and I actually think I heard these first from Bay, but they're probably not from Bay. The beautiful Bay Quiney, who is Adam's lovely wife. So she asked me this question one time in a coaching session, which is like, well, what is that getting you? And what is that getting you out of? Right. And just like look at like this, if a client keeps doing something, there is like something that they're getting from it, right? The people don't just do things because like they just keep creating suffering, right? There's a competing commitment, right? They say they want this thing over here, but they're going to have to give up something down here that they're not willing to give up. And that's really scary. And that's the place to really look. And the place that I see most coaches getting stuck is they're like, well, you said you want this thing, you should want it. I'm like, okay, there's some ghost force in here that you got to pull out and identify. And sometimes the process of extricating those kind of ghost forces going on in your client, not always pretty. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Libby says, well, and it sounds like that connects to what Adam said, because people will be confrontable if you make a container of non-judgment for them, which I remember Tony Robbins said, I've quoted him twice this live, but he said, you can say anything to people if you love them. Anything if you love them. And I used to think like, oh, got it. And I'd tell them like, I love you. And then I'd say something really judgmental and crappy. And I didn't get like, I had to actually love them. And when I'm triggered by someone, it's hard for me to love them because I close my heart. So I think when we are able to really just love them as they are, then yes, we have to say the powerful thing, but then we can say it almost doesn't matter how you say it. Just say it. And they'll be like, Okay, I'm going to reel myself back up to my keyboard, but thanks for saying that.
And it's also possible that your client is so enrolled and filtering everything that comes in as judgment. You
Yeah,
could be like
the
the
minefield.
Dalai Lama, Buddha, Gandhi, like Christ, everything, and like say this perfectly loving thing, and they're going to hear it as "I'm bad, I'm wrong, you're mad at me," and so just be aware that that might happen. So,
Yeah.
cool.
So thank you, Za. Oh, we've got a question from Siawash, and I'm totally going to butcher this name. Hopefully not, but Rabenya, I think that's how you say it, Rabanya, says, you guys are amazing, not camera shy. How do I become like that? So enthusiastic. I'll give two really quick answers to that. One, we do a lot of work with our coaches, and this is generated. Like we are actively what we would call generating our being in this moment. There's times when I want to shy away or when I feel like I said something stupid, and that's the work.
Yeah. I'm going to give two quick answers to that as well. So one is like be around people who inspire you and like, turn you on, get you excited. And like Adam's one of those dudes for me. Like I get more excited talking about coaching. So just spend time around those people who like get you excited. That's one. And then two, yeah, I think the second part of this is like be willing to be like vulnerable in excitement, right? People don't realize that being excited is actually an incredibly vulnerable state. I used to be really excited and I got a lot of like beat down by the school system, like, shut up, sit down, be quiet in class. And it took me a while to like, yeah. Well, luckily my parents said no to that, but it was recommended actually.
Yeah. Right.
And so part of it is like, cool, I'm willing to be vulnerable and being excited. And some people are going to get turned off, right? If you're being super excited, like chances are someone's going to be like, you're being too excited, calm down, get serious. And that's normal. So just accept that vulnerability and be willing to do it anyway.
Rabina. Okay, got it. Thank you. You guys are asking amazing questions. This is great. Should we? I think Siawash's question is really great. You want to hit that?
Yeah. So let's do Siawash's questions. We're supposed to be done here in like 3 minutes. I'm willing to go like a little bit over. Are you cool with that, Adam?
Yeah. Well, why don't we hit this question, and then we can talk a bit about the Samurai Coaching Dojo, and then we're going to do another one of these, if not more.
So
this has been awesome for me.
We'll grab those questions and then put them into and if you guys want us to do this again, the number one way to show us you want us to do this again is send us questions. Yeah. They're like, dear Sensei questions. Because if we have questions to work on, we'll just keep doing lives for you guys. So
yeah.
All right.
So here goes. It's my turn to read, I think. No, it's your turn to read.
Okay. I'm halfway in a group coaching program. One of the clients emailed me and she said she doesn't want to continue now because she wants to go a different direction. In my contract, it says there's no refund. What would you recommend?
So great question, Siwash. Every coach, if they are doing work with clients and the client is moving forward, will confront this at some point. It's inevitable to the process, I believe. And I think it's such a rich place. Like it's so awesome that your client is now at this point because now there's stuff starting to come up. When we get confronted, we want to quit. And to be clear, our confront or our confrontation doesn't always look like, I'm really scared. That's how we think our fear looks like. We shiver and are afraid. But people like me, for example, my confrontation shows up like boredom. It shows up like this isn't productive. It shows up like there's a bunch of other stuff I should be doing and not spending time here. And all of that is naturally going to have me want to leave the coaching because I'm bored, wasting time, it's not productive. I got other stuff to do. And B, it's going to have me disagree if someone says, well, you're actually just afraid, Adam. So it's a golden opportunity to be in and a beautiful place to work with your client. And what I would suggest doing is, first of all, you're right. Like whether or not you're right that the contract has no refund, a lot of coaches jump there first to make themselves feel safe. And all that does is pen your client in and make them even more likely to fight. It's like they feel trapped already. They're scared. They've brought this forward. They know you're standing for them. You are just giving them another place to fight. So you don't want to do that. Instead, what you want to do is meet your client with open arms and just be like, wow, so fucking cool. I'm excited that we're here. Tell me more about it, and really get them. You want to get what's going on for your client because that's such a rich place for them to be. And how often does that happen? If you think about it, where you're like buying a car and you tell a car salesman, like, I'm really afraid and I don't think I want this car. And the car salesman is like, great, tell me about it. I really want to know more. Like, it just doesn't happen, right? So this is a beautiful place that your client's in. I cannot possibly give you all of the things, but meeting your client where they're at and really being curious about it and understanding. And ideally, you want to kind of empathize with them. Like, you want to get them so deeply that when they share, like, well, I don't feel I'm getting the value. I don't feel like you're really pushing me. Great. Tell me how come. And when they tell you, like, see if you can actually get it in your body. Like, wow, I can see why, given everything you laid out, that's how you're feeling. And then once you've gotten them, get them a little bit more, because if you're like most coaches, you probably want to rush into this next part. So spend a little more time getting them. And then I would invite them, I would say, look, I'm not going to force you to do anything, but I think there's really something valuable here for you to explore. And I would love to support you with that. So if you're up for it, are you open to a coaching conversation? Not to convince you to stay or leave or anything, but just to look at what's showing up for you. And then you can actually do the real work with them. Yeah. That's all I'm going to say for now. Toku, what do you want to add to that?
So this actually happened to us, like when we did the first Samurai Coaching Dojo. We had a couple of people who we'd matched as sparring partners, and they like basically on their sparring match had gotten together and decided that the program wasn't very good, and they were mad at us, and that, and they basically like canceled their payments and asked for, it was like a whole thing, right? And so I actually called Rich Litvin. I was like, our program's falling apart, and just wacky waving arm man, right? And so, and he was like, Toku, it's okay. And he's like, we have to do this thing called inoculation. And that's my best Rich impression. And so inoculation is actually a really powerful tool. So one of the things you could do is go to them and say, hey, what happens for people about halfway through my program is very common. And just so you know, it's like very common, like quarter, a half, a 2/3 way. They're like, there's these phases where people like their stuff comes up and they want to quit. What happens for people who are halfway through the program is some of them are like, they're loving it. They're getting incredible value. I think it's the best thing ever and they're totally enrolled. And some people like don't like it and they want to quit. So I just want to say, like, it's totally normal and okay that you want to quit. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Because they're ready for you to fight them. And so if you fight them, they're like, great, you've done the thing that now I can make you the villain. I can go after you. So the first thing is inoculate them. And then again, I would go to the place that Adam went to, which is like, great, can I offer you some coaching around this? And the other thing is to be clear, like if they are no to coaching, they don't, because that's their right? They could say, nope, I'm not interested. I just want my money back. In an ideal world, what we do on our team is say, great, I don't handle refunds, because for whatever reason, there's a breakdown in our relationship now. They don't trust me. And so if they're not willing to do any coaching with me, they probably don't trust me anymore. And that's, I can look at where I caused that. I say, great, I don't handle any refunds in our business. I'm going to put you over to our director of operations. And then it's honestly just a business transaction. If they're not willing to engage, if they're not willing to connect with you, it's just business, right? They're like, look, I just want to deal with this business. And then the director of operations says, hey, it's in your contract. We don't offer any refunds. I'm so sorry. And that's the conversation they have. And he's just like, it's just like a stone wall. And it's like, this is our contract, right? And so I'm always like reaching out and saying, hey, I'd like to fix this. Is there any way I can do it? But if they really are just a no, then the coaching is over. They've declared the coaching is over. And now you're just two people in a business transaction. And I think that there's a way we can not acknowledge that as coaches, that part of this is just a business. And if people want to get treated in a sort of business way, like you can honor that. Like, hey, I get it. You're at the level of like, let's argue about the contract. That's not me, because I really want to keep our relationship solid in coaching. And I'm going to hand you off to the person who just deals with my business.
Yeah, I love it. Let's talk about, I want to talk about Forge, and I also want us to talk about Samurai Coaching Dojo.
Cool.
Game for both of those?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Let's talk about, are you guys enrolling for the Samurai Coaching Dojo right now?
We are. So the next round of the Samurai Coaching Dojo starts on September 7th. The priority deadline is July 31st. So, and we're about, so we have a sales dojo and a coaching dojo, and both are about half full. So we're about halfway full. So there's about 6 left in each. And, we created the coaching dojo because when Christina and I got started as coaches, we went out in the world we were actually going to a lot of Rich Litvin intensives, and we were like, these coaches aren't making any money. Like, why? Like, there's this technique, and we read a book, and we're making money. People say we're great, and all these other coaches are like, they're broke. And we're like, what? Why is that? And so we realized that they just weren't very good, right? And it wasn't their fault. Like, I would do speed coaching with people, and I'd be like, this coach is kind of bad. Like, And then I was like, do I tell them? Like, what do I do? Like, they're doing kind of just a mediocre job. And like, they're yelling at me and they're telling me advice. And I know that's not coaching. And so we said we wanted to create a program that would really teach people how to learn to be masterful coaches based upon our experience of what it takes to be masterful. And so we created this thing called the Samurai Coaching Dojo. We've got an incredible community of people who are part of it. We have some incredible teachers. Adam and Bay have been partners in it. This round is going to be me, Christina Salerno, and Dave Burns, who are incredible coaches leading it. And so if you're a coach who it's been a while since you've done some training, you feel a little stale, want to refresh your training, get back into that path of mastery, it's great. Or if you're a new-ish coach, not like if you have never read a personal development book at all and you're like, what's the ego? Probably not the right thing for you. But if you've done a little bit of training or have some experience where you kind of are ready to get into this more in-depth training, then the dojo is a perfect place for you. So that's what the dojo is about. And Adam and Bay also have a really incredible program that is
Let
called...
me say something about the dojo first, if I could.
Okay.
So one of the things I think is magnificent about the dojo is access to multiple teachers, each with different backgrounds, different styles, and then practice, like you would expect in a dojo. Like, it's very intense. It's, are we doing 8 weeks now or 6? I can't remember.
It's 7. So it's 3 weeks, a break week, and then 3 more weeks.
Right. So tight and intense focus. And you really, when you practice that way, you develop mastery. And so I think that's just one of the things about the coaching dojo that is incredible. It's so much fun. And then the Forging the Steel is the group that Bay and I like these sort of warrior metaphors that we've got.
Yeah.
Forging the Steel is a group that Bay, my wife, also a co-sensei, run. It's a longer program. It's 6 months in duration. And there's 3 things that we are focused on. Certainly practice is one of them. So developing an ability to deepen your own ability as coach. But then in addition to that, we put a lot of attention on building thriving coaching practices and doing the deep inner work, like addressing your being. In the Samurai Coaching Dojo, you get all of that, but it's more intense and it's all through the container, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Toku, but of practice. Whereas Forging the Steel is a little less focused, if you like. Both amazing programs. I can't speak highly enough about them. Bay and I are co-senseiing. When did we start? In March?
The spring dojo next year is March 8th through April 29th.
Yeah. So both programs are incredible. If you want to do deeper work, if you want to play with us on really what this is all about is a more committed level. We are going to keep doing stuff like this and providing content, but it's the commitment that creates the difference. So if that's something that you're interested in, we'd love to talk more about it with you.
Yeah. And I just want to speak a little bit to what you guys have created at the Forge, which is we actually debated a lot, kind of a shorter, more intense program versus a longer program. And we really thought a short program was really powerful. And there is something that happens when you're with people for month after month after month and getting witnessed by 2 of these really incredible coaches like Adam and Bay are, where stuff is going to come out that's not going to necessarily come out in 6 weeks, right? So you get this kind of this longer arc. So they're both really powerful. And I mean, I would actually really recommend that that people kind of do both. And I'm not sure the order really matters, right? Okay. You're going to get something really powerful from Coaching Dojo, and you're going to get something from this longer container. I mean, Adam and I met through a long container that Rich Litvin started, and I got so much from that. And I've done short, intense trainings and gotten a lot from that. So it's not a question of well, which one is the best one? They're both really important and need to be doing some version of both.
Yeah. We have 2 slots left, and we start in September. That's the last bit I'll say about that.
Awesome.
So I will say a piece, and then you can close us down. Sound good, Tokes?
Let's do it.
So everyone who wrote a question, we see them there and we will bring those forward. Thanks, guys. You guys are awesome. This, Dana, you wrote, and it really touched my heart. What did you say? You said, how can you be so cool and smart? And I assumed you were talking, I read that as with a comma, Adam, or Adam and Toku, not just intended for Toku. But thank you. And you guys are so cool too. It's so cool that we get to be in this conversation with you, I'm humbled that any of you would show up and allow us to have any kind of impact. So thank you so much. This is so fun, so cool to get to support the coaching profession in this way.
Cool. First of all, Adam, just thank you so much for doing this with me. I love that like I have a partner in crime, a fellow master I can like play and spar with and have these conversations. So I really want to just acknowledge you for keep showing up in our friendship and our love of coaching. I really appreciate that. And I think at the heart of this, like why I was really motivated to do this is that I have this vision that the world of coaching will be a world in which we treat coaching not as just sort of a profession or something that I like, I'm going to go do this thing and then sell some online products, but it's this really powerful, masterful thing. And if we as coaches can step up our own standards, devote ourselves to practice and mastery, my hope is that in 10, 25 years, coaching will be that's really like a really highly respected profession, something that people really like hold their head proudly and say, I'm a coach, and have that really be honored. And so my part of that is like, I want to create these tools and these communities that help bend the coaching culture in that direction. And so if you're on this call, watching this at all, like whether you ever sign up for any program that Adam and I do, practice your craft, treat what you do with honor and respect because it deserves that honor and respect. And thank you so much for making the time to be with us today.
Next one is August 9th at 10 a.m. PST.
So yeah, send us questions, guys.
Yeah. You can Facebook message us, put questions in the comments of this or whatever.
Share your pigeon. Yeah, whatever you guys want.
All right. Love you, Toku. Love you guys. See you soon.